The smell of fresh baked bread drifted through the afternoon heat of Angel's Camp, California. And Lucas Zimmerman had never been so hungry in all his 26 years of living. He had been riding for 3 days straight from Nevada, chasing a lead on ranch work that turned out to be nothing more than smoke and wishful thinking. And now, he was down to his last few coins with a horse that needed shoeing and a stomach that felt like it was eating itself from the inside out. The year was 1876, and the gold rush days were fading into memory, but Angel's Camp still held onto its Wild West spirit with dirt roads, weathered storefronts, and the constant sound of horses and wagon wheels passing through. Lucas dismounted in front of the general store, tying his mare to the hitching post with practiced ease. His clothes were covered in trail dust, his dark hair needed cutting, and his jaw was rough with several days of stubble. He looked exactly like what he was, a drifter trying to make an honest living in a world that did not always reward honest work. As he stepped toward the store entrance, he heard it. A woman's voice, humming a melody so pure and sweet it stopped him dead in his tracks. The tune was unfamiliar but beautiful, rising and falling with an ease that suggested the woman singing it was lost in her own world, unburdened by the cares that weighed down most folks trying to survive in this rough country. Lucas found himself drawn toward the sound like a moth to lantern light. He moved quietly around the side of the building, following the melody until he spotted her. She stood in the garden behind the store, hanging laundry on a line stretched between 2 posts. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical bun, though several strands had escaped to frame her face. She wore a simple calico dress in faded blue, and her hands moved with efficient grace as she pinned a sheet to the line. But it was her face that caught his attention most. She looked to be around his age, maybe a year or 2 younger, with delicate features and a serene expression that suggested contentment despite the mundane nature of her task. She continued humming, completely unaware of his presence. The melody shifted to something livelier, and she swayed slightly as she worked, her movements matching the rhythm of her song. Lucas knew he should announce himself, knew it was improper to stand there watching her like some kind of fool, but he could not make himself move. There was something about this moment about her that felt important in a way he could not quite name. The song came to a natural end, and she reached down into her basket for another piece of laundry. That was when she looked up and saw him standing there. Her eyes widened and she let out a small gasp of surprise, dropping the shirt she had just picked up. "I am sorry," Lucas said quickly, removing his hat. "I did not mean to startle you. I was heading into the store and I heard you humming. It was so pretty I just stopped to listen." Her face flushed pink, but she did not look angry, just embarrassed. "How long were you standing there?" "Not long," he lied. "I apologize. That was rude of me. I will be on my way." "Wait," she said, bending to pick up the dropped shirt. "You said you were going to the store." "Yes, madam. I was hoping to buy some supplies." "Then you should go around to the front entrance. My father runs the place." She paused, studying him with eyes that were a remarkable shade of green. But fair warning, he is particular about strangers, especially ones who go lurking around his property. "I was not lurking," Lucas protested. "I was following the music." "Is that what the lurkers are calling it these days?" She had a slight smile now, teasing him. Despite his embarrassment, Lucas found himself grinning back. "I promise you, madam, I am no lurker. Just a tired cowboy looking to buy some beans and coffee if I can afford it." She tilted her head and her expression softened. "You look like you have been riding hard. Where are you coming from?" "Nevada. I heard there might be work at the Morrison Ranch outside town, but when I got there, they told me they had filled all their positions 2 weeks ago." "That sounds like the Morrisons. They never update their postings." She wiped her hands on her apron. "Are you looking for ranch work specifically?" "Any honest work, really. I have experience with cattle, horses, general ranch maintenance. I can do carpentry in a pinch, though I am better with animals than lumber." She seemed to consider this. "My father might know of something. He hears all the town gossip. I am Rose, by the way." "Rose Garrett, Lucas Zimmerman." He took a step forward and extended his hand. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. Her hand was smaller than his, with calluses that spoke of regular work, and the touch sent an unexpected jolt through him. "Well, Lucas Zimmerman, let me finish hanging this laundry, and then I will introduce you to my father properly. He is less likely to be suspicious if I vouch for you." "I appreciate that, Miss Garrett. Just Rose is fine." She turned back to her basket and resumed her work. After a moment, she started humming again, the same sweet melody that had first caught his attention. Lucas stood there, hat still in his hands, watching her work and feeling like something in his life had just shifted in a direction he had not anticipated. When she finished the last piece of laundry, Rose wiped her hands again and gestured for him to follow her. They walked around to the front of the building, and she led him through the door into the dim interior of the general store. The space was packed with goods, from barrels of flour and sugar to farming tools, fabric, canned goods, and just about anything else a person might need. Behind the counter stood a man in his 50s with thinning gray hair and sharp eyes that immediately fixed on Lucas with suspicion. "Rose, who is this?" The man's voice was not unkind, but it was wary. "This is Lucas Zimmerman, Papa. He just rode in from Nevada looking for work. The Morrison Ranch did not have anything for him." "That's so." Mr. Garrett looked Lucas up and down. "And why exactly are you bringing him in here?" "Because he looks hungry, and I thought maybe you had heard of someone needing a ranch hand." Rose's voice was patient, like she was used to her father's protective nature. "I have money," Lucas said quickly, pulling out his few remaining coins. "I am not asking for charity. I just need some basic supplies to tide me over until I can find work." Mr. Garrett's expression softened slightly. "What kind of work can you do?" "Anything involving cattle or horses, sir. I have been working ranches since I was 14. I know how to break horses, mend fences, handle branding, drive cattle. I can also do basic blacksmithing and carpentry if needed." "You any good with horses?" "Yes, sir. That is my strongest skill." Mr. Garrett nodded slowly. "The Hendersons have a spread about 5 miles west of town. I heard Mrs. Henderson mention last week that they were having trouble with a couple of wild horses they bought. Thought they got a good deal, but the animals turned out to be more spirited than they bargained for. If you could break those horses for them, they would probably pay you fair and maybe have more work after that." Lucas felt a surge of hope. "That sounds perfect. Could you give me directions?" Mr. Garrett did, describing the route in detail. When he finished, Lucas selected a small bag of coffee beans, some dried beef, and a can of peaches, carefully counting out his money. It left him with almost nothing, but he would need the energy for the work ahead. As Mr. Garrett wrapped up the purchases, Rose appeared beside Lucas with a loaf of bread in her hands. "Add this to his order, Papa. Put it on our family account." "Miss Rose, I cannot accept that," Lucas protested. "Consider it payment for entertaining me this afternoon. Not many strangers wander back to my laundry line to listen to my humming." Her eyes sparkled with humor. "Your humming is worth far more than a loaf of bread," Lucas said, and then immediately felt his face heat up at how forward that sounded. Rose's cheeks pinked again, but she smiled. "Well, then consider it an investment. If the Hendersons hire you, you will be around these parts for a while. We would hate for you to starve before you can become a regular customer." Mr. Garrett watched this exchange with a thoughtful expression but said nothing. He added the bread to Lucas's supplies and tied everything together in a neat package. "If the Hendersons do hire you, tell them I sent you. John Henderson and I have done business for years." "Thank you, sir. I appreciate the kindness." Lucas took his package and turned to Rose. "And thank you, Rose, for the bread and for the help. You are welcome. Good luck with those horses." Lucas walked out of the store feeling lighter than he had in days, despite the hunger still gnawing at his belly. As he untied his mare and prepared to mount up, he glanced back at the store window. Rose was standing there watching him. When their eyes met, she raised her hand in a small wave. He waved back, then swung into the saddle and turned his horse toward the western road. The ride to the Henderson ranch took just over an hour. Lucas used the time to eat some of the dried beef and plan his approach. Breaking horses was as much about patience and understanding as it was about strength and skill. He had learned that lesson the hard way when he was younger, watching older cowboys muscle their way through the process and often end up with horses that were broken in spirit as well as will. Lucas preferred a gentler method, one that took longer but resulted in animals that trusted their riders. The Henderson spread was modest but well-maintained, with a white-painted house, a large barn, and several corrals. As Lucas rode up, a man in his 40s emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his pants. He had the weathered look of someone who had spent his life working outdoors. "Can I help you?" the man called out. Lucas dismounted. "Are you Mr. Henderson? My name is Lucas Zimmerman. Mr. Garrett at the general store in Angel's Camp said you might have some work, something about a couple of horses that need breaking." Henderson's face brightened. "Tom sent you." "Well, that is good timing. Come on, I will show you what we are dealing with." He led Lucas to a corral on the far side of the barn. Inside were two horses, a gray mare and a black gelding, both pacing nervously along the fence line. They were beautiful animals with good lines, but Lucas could see the wildness in their eyes. "Bought them off a fellow passing through," Henderson explained. "Said they were green but trainable. Turns out they have never been properly handled. Every time we try to get close, they spook. My son tried to rope the mare and nearly got himself kicked into next week." Lucas studied the horses carefully. "How long have you had them?" 2 weeks. We have been giving them feed and water, but otherwise leaving them alone. Figured maybe they would settle down, but it has not helped much." "They need time and patience," Lucas said. "It will not be quick, but I can work with them. What are you willing to pay?" They negotiated a fair wage, plus meals and a place to sleep in the barn while Lucas worked. Henderson also mentioned that if things went well, there might be more permanent work available. One of his regular hands had recently left to get married and moved to Oregon, and they were short-staffed. Lucas started that very afternoon. He moved slowly and deliberately, entering the corral with nothing but patience and a calm demeanor. He did not try to approach the horses directly. Instead, he simply existed in their space, letting them get used to his presence. When they would allow it, he talked to them in a low, steady voice. The mare was the more nervous of the two, shying away whenever he took a step in her direction, but the gelding showed curiosity, watching Lucas with alert dark eyes. The work was slow and methodical. By the time the sun began to set, Lucas had managed to get within 10 feet of the gelding without the horse bolting, which he considered good progress. Mrs. Henderson, a kind woman with graying brown hair, brought him dinner at the barn, a hearty stew with fresh bread that reminded him of Rose's gift that morning. As he ate, Lucas found his thoughts drifting back to the general store, to the woman humming in her garden. There had been something about her, something that went beyond her pretty face and sweet voice. It was the contentment he had seen in her, the way she found joy in something as simple as hanging laundry. In his years of drifting from town to town, from ranch to ranch, Lucas had seen so many people who were just surviving, just getting through each day. Rose had looked like she was actually living. That night, lying on a bedroll in the hayloft, Lucas made a decision. If the Hendersons offered him permanent work, he would take it. It was time to stop drifting. And if staying in Angel's camp meant he might have the chance to hear Rose Garrett hum again, well, that was just an added benefit. The next morning, Lucas woke before dawn and returned to his work with the horses. The gelding was slightly more comfortable with him, allowing Lucas to get within arm's reach before sidestepping away. The mare remained skittish, but she at least stopped trying to kick the fence down every time he entered the corral. Over the next week, Lucas made steady progress. He spent hours each day in the corral, gradually earning the horse's trust. Mr. Henderson checked on him regularly and seemed impressed by the methodical approach. By the 8th day, Lucas was able to touch the gelding's shoulder, and the animal only flinched slightly before holding still. On the 10th day, which was a Sunday, Henderson told Lucas to take the afternoon off. "You have been working non-stop. Go into town, get a proper meal, maybe a bath. You have earned it." Lucas did not need to be told twice. He cleaned up as best he could, borrowed a clean shirt from Henderson's son, who was about his size, and rode into Angel's camp. The town was busier than it had been during his first visit, with families in their Sunday clothes heading home from church services. Lucas found himself drawn back to the general store. He told himself it was because he needed to thank Mr. Garrett for the referral, but he knew the truth. He was hoping to see Rose again. The store was closed for Sunday, but as Lucas stood there trying to decide what to do next, he heard a familiar voice call his name. He turned to see Rose walking toward him, wearing a green dress that brought out the color of her eyes. She carried a basket over one arm. "Lucas, I heard the Hendersons hired you. How is the work going?" "It is going well. Those horses are coming around. I should have the gelding ready to ride in another week or so." "That is wonderful." She seemed genuinely pleased. "Are you here for supplies?" "The store is closed today, but if you need something urgently, I can open it up." "No, nothing urgent. I actually came to thank your father for sending me their way. The Hendersons have been good to me." Rose smiled. "I will tell him. He will be pleased to hear it worked out." She paused, then added, "I am heading to the church for a community supper. Would you like to come? There is always more than enough food, and it is a good way to meet people in town." Lucas hesitated. He had not been to a church function in years. His life of drifting had not lent itself to putting down roots in any community. But looking at Rose's hopeful expression, he found himself nodding. "I would like that. Thank you." They walked together through town, and Rose pointed out various buildings and told him about the people who owned them. She had lived in Angel's camp her whole life, she explained. Her mother had passed away when Rose was 16, which was 7 years ago now, and since then she had helped her father run the store. "You ever think about leaving?" Lucas asked. "Seeing other places?" Rose considered the question. "Sometimes. But this is my home. These are my people. I think there is value in staying somewhere and being part of a community, watching it grow and change. Not everyone is meant to wander." Her words were not accusatory, but Lucas felt the implicit question. "What about you? Are you a wanderer? Or are you looking for a place to belong?" Before he could formulate an answer, they arrived at the church, a simple white building with a tall steeple. Behind it was an open area where tables had been set up, and people milled about with plates of food and glasses of lemonade. Rose led him into the mix, introducing him to what felt like half the town. There was the school teacher, Miss Patricia Morton, who immediately tried to recruit him for a barn raising next month. There was the blacksmith, Samuel Chen, whose family had come from China 20 years ago during the gold rush and stayed when the mining dried up. There was the doctor, an older man named Frank Sullivan, and the minister, Reverend James Whitmore, and so many others that Lucas's head spun trying to remember all the names. Through it all, Rose stayed by his side, easing the way with her gentle presence and ready smile. Lucas found himself relaxing in a way he had not in years. These people were not suspicious of him or judging him for his worn clothes and drifter's reputation. They were simply welcoming, drawn in part by Rose's acceptance of him. As the afternoon wore on, someone brought out a fiddle, and another person produced a guitar. Music filled the air, lively tunes that had people clapping and tapping their feet. Lucas stood on the sidelines, watching the festivities with a sense of wonder. This was what he had been missing all these years, not just a place but a community, a home. "You dance." Rose appeared at his elbow, her face flushed from the heat and excitement. "Not well," Lucas admitted, "but I am willing to try if you are willing to risk your toes." She laughed, a sound that was even better than her humming. "Come on then, I will teach you." She took his hand and led him into the area where couples were dancing. The current song was a lively reel, and Lucas did his best to follow Rose's lead, though he suspected he looked like a newborn calf trying to find its legs. Rose did not seem to mind. She was patient with his missteps and encouraging when he got something right. When the song ended and a slower melody began, Rose did not let go of his hand. Instead, she stepped closer, placing her free hand on his shoulder. Lucas put his hand on her waist, feeling the warmth of her through the fabric of her dress. They swayed together, and for a moment the rest of the world fell away. "I am glad you came to town," Rose said softly, her eyes meeting his. "So am I," Lucas replied, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. They danced through 2 more songs before Rose was called away to help serve dessert. Lucas watched her go, feeling oddly bereft without her beside him. He was filling a glass with lemonade when Mr. Garrett appeared next to him. "My daughter seems to have taken a shine to you," the older man said without preamble. Lucas felt his stomach drop. "Sir, I assure you I have been nothing but respectful." "I know that. If I thought otherwise, we would be having a very different conversation." Garrett fixed him with a steady look. "Rose is a good girl, a good woman. She deserves someone who will stay, who will build a life here, not someone who will sweep through like a summer storm and leave her heartbroken." The words stung because they cut so close to Lucas's own fears. "I understand your concern, sir. I have been a drifter most of my adult life, but I am tired of wandering. The Hendersons mentioned they might have permanent work for me if things continue to go well. If they offer it, I plan to accept and settle here. And if they do not offer it?" Lucas met the older man's gaze steadily. "Then I will find other work. There is always need for someone willing to do honest labor. The point is, I am not planning to leave Angel's camp, not anymore." Garrett studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But know this. If you hurt my daughter, you will answer to me and to every person in this town who loves her, and that is just about everyone." "I would expect nothing less, sir." The tension broke, and Garrett's expression softened. "You seem like a decent young man, Lucas. I hope you prove me right about that." "I will do my best, sir." Later that evening, as the gathering wound down, Lucas walked Rose back to her home above the general store. The sun had set, and stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. They walked slowly, neither in a hurry for the evening to end. "Thank you for inviting me today," Lucas said as they reached her door. "I have not felt part of something like that in a long time. You are welcome. I hope it is just the first of many community gatherings you attend." Rose looked up at him, and even in the dim light he could see the warmth in her eyes. Will you come back to town next Sunday? After church, a group of us usually have lunch together. I would like that very much." They stood there in the comfortable silence for a moment, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Finally, Rose reached out and squeezed his hand. "Good night, Lucas." "Good night, Rose." He watched until she disappeared inside, then mounted his horse and rode back to the Henderson ranch with a lightness in his chest he had not felt in years. The stars above seemed brighter than usual, and the night air smelled sweet with possibility. Over the following weeks, Lucas fell into a rhythm. He worked with the horses during the week, making steady progress. The gelding, which Henderson had named Thunder, proved to be intelligent and responsive once he understood that Lucas meant him no harm. Lucas was able to saddle him on the third week and ride him around the corral by the fourth. The mare, who Henderson called Storm, took longer, but she gradually came around, especially after seeing Thunder's calm acceptance of Lucas's handling. Every Sunday, Lucas rode into town for church services and the community meal that followed. He and Rose fell into an easy friendship, talking about everything from the books she loved to read to his experiences working different ranches across the territory. She told him about her mother, about the grief that had nearly broken her father, and how running the store together had helped them both heal. He told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, about leaving home at 14 after his parents died in a cholera outbreak, about the years of wandering from place to place, never quite finding where he belonged. "You think you could belong here?" Rose asked one Sunday afternoon as they walked along the creek that ran behind the town. It was late October now, and the cottonwood trees were turning gold. "I think I already do," Lucas answered honestly. "Being here in this town, it feels right in a way nothing else ever has." "Is it the town?" Rose asked, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Or is there something else making it feel right?" Lucas stopped walking and turned to face her. They had been dancing around this for weeks now, the growing feelings between them. It was time to be honest. "You know it is you, Rose. From that first day when I heard you humming while you worked, something shifted in me. I stopped being a drifter looking for the next job and became a man looking for a reason to stay. And that reason is standing right in front of me." Rose's breath caught. "Lucas, I know I do not have much to offer. I am still living in the Hendersons' barn, and my entire worldly possessions fit in a saddlebag. But I am asking, with Mr. Henderson's permanent job offer that came through yesterday, if you would give me a chance. Let me court you properly. Let me prove that I am a man who keeps his word and that when I say I am staying, I mean it." Tears glistened in Rose's eyes, but she was smiling. "You do not need to prove anything. I have watched you these past weeks. I have seen how hard you work, how kind you are to the Hendersons, how you have become part of this community. And I have felt my heart turning toward you more each day. So yes, Lucas Zimmerman, you may court me, and I will be honored to be courted." Lucas felt like his chest might burst from happiness. "May I kiss you?" "I was hoping you would ask." He leaned down, and she rose on her toes to meet him. Their lips touched softly at first, tentative and sweet. Then Rose's hands came up to rest on his chest, and Lucas wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, full of promise and hope and the beginning of something beautiful. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Rose laughed softly. "Well, that was worth waiting for. I plan to kiss you like that as often as you will allow it," Lucas said, grinning. "I will hold you to that promise." They walked back to town hand in hand, and if people noticed and smiled knowingly at each other, neither Lucas nor Rose paid any attention. They were too wrapped up in the joy of new love to care about anything else. The courtship that followed was everything Lucas had imagined a proper courtship should be. He spent his free time with Rose, learning everything he could about her. He discovered that she loved poetry and would sometimes make up her own verses while working. He learned that she was passionate about education and had helped establish a small lending library in the back room of the general store so that everyone in town would have access to books. He found out that she had a fierce protective streak when it came to people she cared about, and that she had once publicly dressed down a traveling salesman who had tried to cheat an elderly customer. Rose, in turn, learned more about Lucas. She discovered that despite his rough exterior, he had a gentle soul and a way with animals that bordered on magical. She learned that he could not carry a tune to save his life, but loved listening to music. She found out that he had a dry sense of humor that caught people off guard, and that he was deeply loyal to those who earned his trust. Mr. Garrett watched the developing relationship with approval, though he remained protective of his daughter. Lucas understood and respected that. He made sure to always treat Rose with the utmost respect, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. They stole kisses when they could find private moments, but Lucas was determined to do things right. Winter came to Angel's camp, bringing cold winds and occasional snow. Lucas moved from the Hendersons' barn into a small room above the livery stable in town, which was warmer and put him closer to Rose. He continued working for the Hendersons but also took on other jobs around town, building his reputation as someone reliable and skilled. The money he earned went into a small lockbox under his bed, savings for a future he was beginning to envision with increasing clarity. On Christmas Eve, the town held a celebration at the church, complete with caroling and a nativity play performed by the local children. Lucas and Rose sat together, her hand warm in his. As the children sang and the candles flickered, Lucas thought about how much his life had changed in just 6 months. He had arrived in Angel's camp hungry, dusty, and desperate. Now he had a job, a home, a community, and most importantly, a woman he loved with all his heart. Yes, loved. He had been trying not to use that word even in his own mind, thinking it was too soon, but there was no point in denying it anymore. He was completely, utterly, irrevocably in love with Rose Garrett. After the service, as they stood outside in the cold night air watching the stars, Lucas turned to Rose. "I have something for you." He pulled a small, wrapped package from his coat pocket. Rose's eyes widened. "Lucas, you did not have to get me anything." "I wanted to. Open it." With trembling fingers, Rose unwrapped the package to reveal a silver locket on a delicate chain. It was not fancy, but it was pretty and well made, and it had taken a significant portion of Lucas's savings. Rose opened the locket and gasped softly. Inside was a tiny, beautifully rendered sketch of a cowboy's hat. "I know it is not much," Lucas said nervously, "but I wanted you to have something to remember that first day, when I stopped to listen to you hum and my whole life changed." "It is perfect," Rose whispered. She handed it to him. "Will you put it on me?" Lucas fastened the locket around her neck with slightly clumsy fingers. When it was secure, Rose touched it gently, her eyes shining with tears. "I love it, and I love you, Lucas." It was the first time either of them had spoken those words aloud. Lucas felt his heart stutter in his chest. "You do?" "Of course I do. How could I not? You are everything I never knew I was waiting for." "I love you too, Rose. So much it scares me sometimes. I keep thinking I will wake up and find out this was all a dream, that I am still that hungry drifter and you are just a figment of my imagination." Rose reached up and cupped his face with her hand. "I am real. This is real, and I am not going anywhere." Lucas kissed her then, there in the snow outside the church, with the sounds of celebration and laughter around them. It was a kiss full of love and commitment and the promise of all the tomorrows they would share. Christmas morning, Lucas was invited to have breakfast with Rose and her father. It was a warm, joyful affair, with gifts exchanged and stories told. Mr. Garrett gave Lucas a new pair of work gloves, a practical gift that was nonetheless thoughtful. Rose gave him a hand-knitted scarf in deep blue. Lucas had made gifts too, carving a new sign for the general store to replace the faded old one, and crafting a small jewelry box for Rose from polished wood. As they sat around the table after breakfast, Mr. Garrett cleared his throat. "Lucas, I have been thinking. Business has been growing at the store, and I am not getting any younger. I could use help with the heavier work, the stocking and inventory and such. If you are interested, I could offer you part-time work. You could keep your job with the Hendersons but help me out a few days a week." Lucas was stunned. "Sir, I would be honored, thank you." "Do not thank me yet. Rose runs a tight ship when it comes to the store. You will be answering to her as much as to me." Mr. Garrett's eyes twinkled. Rose laughed. "Papa is right, I am a demanding boss." "I have no doubt," Lucas said, smiling at her. "And I look forward to it." As winter gave way to spring, Lucas split his time between the Henderson Ranch and the general store. He liked the variety of work, and he especially enjoyed the days at the store when he could work alongside Rose. They developed an easy rhythm, anticipating each other's needs and movements like a team that had been together for years, rather than months. It was during one of these spring days, as they were rearranging a display of fabric bolts, that Lucas realized he could not wait any longer. He had been planning to wait until he had saved more money, until he could offer Rose the kind of life she deserved. But watching her hum while she worked, seeing the sunlight catch in her auburn hair, he knew that the timing did not matter. What mattered was that they loved each other and wanted to build a life together. That evening, after the store closed, Lucas asked Mr. Garrett if he could speak with him privately. They went into the small office behind the counter, and Lucas's heart hammered in his chest. "Sir, I have something to ask you, and I will understand if you think it is too soon." Lucas took a deep breath. "I love your daughter. I love her more than I thought it was possible to love another person. I know I am not a man of means and I cannot give her a grand life. But I can promise that I will work hard every day to provide for her, to protect her, and to make her happy. So I am asking for your blessing to marry Rose." Mr. Garrett sat back in his chair, studying Lucas with an unreadable expression. The silence stretched until Lucas thought he might burst from the tension. Finally, the older man spoke. "When you first came to town, I was not sure about you. Too many drifters pass through promising one thing and delivering another. But you have proven yourself, Lucas. Not just to me, but to this whole town. You are a hard worker, an honest man, and you make my daughter happier than I have seen her since her mother died. So yes, you have my blessing. I would be proud to call you my son." Relief and joy flooded through Lucas. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Just promise me one thing. Anything, make her happy. Every single day, that is all I ask." "I promise," Lucas said solemnly. "On my life, I promise." They shook hands, and then Mr. Garrett surprised Lucas by pulling him into a brief embrace. "Welcome to the family, son." Now came the harder part, figuring out how to propose. Lucas wanted it to be special, something Rose would remember forever. He spent days thinking about it, discarding one idea after another as not good enough. Finally, inspiration struck. The following Sunday, Lucas asked Rose if she would like to go for a ride after church. The weather was beautiful, with wildflowers blooming across the hills and the sky a brilliant blue. Rose agreed eagerly, and they rode out of town together, Lucas leading the way to a spot he had discovered weeks ago. It was a meadow on a hillside overlooking the valley, with Angel's Camp visible in the distance. Cottonwood trees provided shade on one side, and a small stream burbled nearby. Lucas had come out earlier and prepared a picnic, hiding it in the shade. "Oh, Lucas, this is beautiful," Rose breathed as they dismounted. "I thought you might like it." He retrieved the picnic basket and spread out a blanket. They sat together, eating cold chicken and fresh bread, talking and laughing. When they finished eating, Lucas stood and offered Rose his hand. "What are you doing?" she asked, smiling. "Dance with me." "There is no music." "Then you will have to hum something." Rose laughed, but allowed him to pull her to her feet. She began humming the same melody Lucas had first heard her sing all those months ago while she hung laundry. They swayed together in the meadow, the sounds of nature providing accompaniment to Rose's sweet voice. When the song ended, Lucas did not let go. He took both her hands in his and looked into her green eyes. "Rose, do you remember the first time we met, when you caught me lurking by your laundry line?" "You were not lurking," Rose said, smiling. "You were listening." "I was listening to the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. But it was more than that. In that moment, something inside me recognized something inside you. It felt like coming home after years of being lost." Lucas took a shaky breath. "These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You have given me a home, a purpose, a reason to be the best man I can be, and I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you have made me." Lucas released one of her hands and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small ring. It was a simple gold band with a small sapphire, modest but lovely. "I know it is not much." "Lucas, are you proposing?" Rose's voice was breathless, her eyes shining. "Yes, Rose Garrett, will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband, your partner, your love for all the days we have left?" "Yes." Rose threw her arms around his neck. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Lucas picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, he slipped the ring onto her finger and it fit perfectly. They kissed, long and deep, sealing their promise to each other. "When did you get this ring?" Rose asked, admiring it on her hand. "I have been saving for months. I bought it from a jeweler in Jackson 2 weeks ago when I went to deliver some horses." "It is perfect. You are perfect." Rose kissed him again. "Can we get married soon? I do not want to wait." "Neither do I. What would you think about a summer wedding?" "That gives us time to plan, but is not too far away." "Summer would be perfect." They spent the rest of the afternoon in the meadow, making plans and dreaming about their future. They would live above the store initially, in the rooms Rose currently shared with her father. Mr. Garrett would move to a smaller space in the back, which he said he preferred anyway. Eventually, they hoped to build their own house, maybe on a piece of land outside town. They talked about children, about growing old together, about all the adventures and challenges that lay ahead. As the sun began to set, they reluctantly packed up and headed back to town. They went straight to Mr. Garrett to share the news, though he was not surprised, having already been in on the secret. He opened a bottle of wine he had been saving for a special occasion, and they toasted to the future. News of the engagement spread through Angel's camp like wildfire. Everyone was happy for the couple, and the upcoming wedding became a community affair. The women organized themselves to help with the planning, from making Rose's dress to preparing food for the reception. The men pitched in too, with plans to build a special arbor for the ceremony and to make sure the church looked its finest. Lucas continued working and saving money, determined to start his married life on solid financial footing. The Hendersons were thrilled about the wedding and gave him a bonus in celebration, which he immediately added to his savings. Mr. Garrett taught him more about running the store, preparing him to eventually take over the business entirely. The weeks flew by in a whirlwind of preparation. Rose and her friends worked on her wedding dress, a beautiful creation in cream-colored silk that they had ordered special from San Francisco. Lucas bought himself a new suit, the first he had ever owned. He felt like a different person wearing it, no longer a dusty cowboy but a respectable member of the community. The night before the wedding, Lucas stayed at the Henderson Ranch, following tradition. He barely slept, too excited and nervous about the day ahead. John Henderson found him in the barn before dawn, trying to distract himself by checking on the horses. "Nervous?" Henderson asked with a knowing smile. "Terrified," Lucas admitted. "What if I mess up the vows? What if I step on her dress? What if you just show up and love her?" Henderson interrupted. "That is all you need to do, son. The rest will take care of itself. You are right. I know you are right. I just want everything to be perfect for her. It will be perfect because she will be marrying the man she loves. Trust me, the details will not matter nearly as much as you think they do." Henderson's words helped calm Lucas's nerves. When the time came to head to town, he felt more centered, more ready for what lay ahead. The church was packed with what seemed like everyone in Angel's Camp and the surrounding area. Flowers decorated every available surface, and candles provided a warm glow. Lucas stood at the front of the church with Reverend Whitmore, his hands clasped to keep them from shaking. John Henderson stood beside him as his best man, offering silent support. Then the music began, and Rose appeared at the back of the church on her father's arm. She looked like an angel. The cream dress fit her perfectly, and her auburn hair was arranged in an intricate style with small flowers woven through it. But it was her face that captivated Lucas. She was smiling, radiant with happiness, her eyes locked on his. As she walked down the aisle, Lucas felt tears prick his eyes. This beautiful, kind, incredible woman had chosen him. A former drifter with nothing to his name but calloused hands and a willing heart. Mr. Garrett placed Rose's hand in Lucas's, and Lucas felt the rightness of it settle into his bones. This was where he was meant to be. This was who he was meant to be with. Everything he had experienced, every hard road he had traveled, had led him to this moment. The ceremony was beautiful, the vows heartfelt. When Reverend Whitmore pronounced them husband and wife, Lucas kissed his bride with all the love in his heart. The church erupted in applause and cheers. They walked back down the aisle together, no longer two separate people but one united couple, ready to face whatever life brought them. The reception was held in the same area behind the church where Lucas had first danced with Rose all those months ago. There was food and music and dancing and laughter. Lucas danced with his wife again and again, never tiring of holding her in his arms. When Rose started humming along with the fiddle music, Lucas felt his heart swell almost painfully with love. "I am the luckiest man alive," he whispered in her ear. "And I am the luckiest woman," Rose whispered back. "Thank you for stopping to listen that day. Thank you for letting me stay." As the celebration continued around them, Lucas and Rose stood in the center of it all, wrapped in each other's arms, knowing they had found something precious and rare. They had found home in each other. The first year of marriage was an adjustment, as all first years are. Lucas and Rose learned each other's habits and rhythms, figured out how to share space and make decisions together. There were small disagreements, usually about inconsequential things like how to organize the store's inventory or whether they needed new curtains. But they never went to bed angry, always talking through their differences until they found common ground. Lucas threw himself into being a good husband and business partner. He took on more responsibilities at the store, learning the intricacies of ordering and accounting. He still did some work for the Hendersons, particularly when they needed help with difficult horses, but his primary focus was the store and his wife. Rose blossomed in marriage. She had always been happy, but now there was an added depth to her joy. She loved having Lucas as her partner in all things, loved sharing her days and nights with him. The room above the store that had always felt a bit empty now felt cozy and warm. In the spring of their second year of marriage, Rose discovered she was expecting a child. Lucas was overjoyed, already imagining teaching his son or daughter everything he knew about horses and ranching. Rose was excited too, though nervous about the changes a baby would bring. Mr. Garrett was thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandfather. He immediately began planning, converting the storage room into a nursery and buying a beautiful cradle from the furniture maker in Jackson. The whole town rallied around Rose, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes and promises to help when the time came. As Rose's belly grew, Lucas became even more protective. He insisted she not lift anything heavy, not climb ladders, not push herself too hard. Rose tolerated his hovering with amused patience, though she occasionally had to remind him that pregnancy was not an illness. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time," she told him one evening when he tried to stop her from sweeping the store floor. "I am perfectly capable of doing my normal work." "I know, but I worry. You and this baby are the most important things in my life. I could not bear it if something happened to either of you." Rose set down the broom and wrapped her arms around him as much as her belly would allow. "Nothing is going to happen. I am strong and healthy, and Dr. Sullivan says everything is progressing perfectly. You need to trust that." "I do trust it. I just also want to protect you. You can protect me by being calm and supportive, not by treating me like I am made of glass." Lucas took a deep breath. "You are right. I am sorry. I will try to be less hovering. I appreciate that." Rose kissed him softly. "And I appreciate that your hovering comes from a place of love." On a warm October evening, as the harvest was coming in and the leaves were beginning to turn, Rose's labor began. Lucas was simultaneously excited and terrified. Dr. Sullivan arrived quickly, along with Mrs. Henderson and several other women from town who had experience with childbirth. Lucas was banished to the store below, where he paced nervously while Mr. Garrett tried to distract him with conversation. The hours crawled by. Lucas heard the sounds from above and felt helpless, wishing there was something, anything, he could do. Mr. Garrett shared stories of when Rose was born, how he had felt the same mixture of excitement and fear. "It is the hardest and most rewarding thing you will ever do," the older man said. "Being a parent, nothing else will ever compare." Just before midnight, Lucas heard a new sound, the unmistakable cry of a newborn baby. He froze, his heart in his throat. A few minutes later, Mrs. Henderson appeared at the top of the stairs, beaming. "Congratulations, Lucas. You have a son. And Rose is doing wonderfully." Lucas took the stairs two at a time. He burst into the room to find Rose propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a white blanket. Lucas approached slowly, almost reverently. "Come meet your son," Rose said softly. Lucas sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at the baby's face. He had dark hair like Lucas and a tiny, perfect face. His eyes were closed, but his little fists waved in the air. "He is beautiful," Lucas breathed. "You are beautiful. I cannot believe you did this. You are amazing." "We did this," Rose corrected. "Together. Would you like to hold him?" With shaking hands, Lucas took his son into his arms. The baby was so small, so fragile, and yet Lucas could already feel the weight of responsibility settling onto his shoulders. This little person would depend on him for everything. He would need to be worthy of that trust. "Hello, little one," Lucas whispered. "I am your papa, and I promise you I will spend every day of my life trying to be the father you deserve." The baby made a small noise, almost like a sigh, and settled into Lucas's arms. Rose watched them with tears streaming down her face, tears of joy and exhaustion and overwhelming love. "What should we name him?" Lucas asked. They had discussed names but had not settled on anything definite. Rose looked thoughtful. "What about James, after my grandfather, James Zimmerman?" Lucas tested the name. "I like it. James Lucas Zimmerman. Perfect," Rose agreed. The weeks that followed were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings, and more laundry than Lucas thought was possible for one tiny human to generate. But they were also filled with moments of breathtaking joy. The first time James smiled at him. The way Rose hummed lullabies while nursing the baby. The feeling of completeness when they sat together as a family in the evening light. Mr. Garrett was a doting grandfather, taking every opportunity to hold his grandson and spoil him. The community embraced little James too, with a constant stream of visitors bringing gifts and meals and offers of help. Lucas was touched by how thoroughly Angel's Camp had become his home, how these people had become his family. As James grew from a newborn into an infant, and then a toddler, Lucas and Rose settled into their roles as parents. They learned to function on less sleep, to communicate in shorthand when the baby needed something, to find moments of connection even when they were exhausted. Their love deepened, strengthened by the challenges they faced together and the joy they shared in their son. When James was 2, Rose became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier. Lucas was still protective but less frantically so, trusting in Rose's strength and capability. Their daughter was born on a spring morning, coming into the world with a lusty cry that suggested she would be a force to be reckoned with. They named her Sarah, after Rose's mother. She had Rose's auburn hair and green eyes, and from the start, she was a daddy's girl. Lucas loved both his children equally, but there was something special about having a daughter. She wrapped him around her little finger from the first moment he held her. The years passed in a happy blur. The store continued to thrive under their management. Mr. Garrett eventually retired fully, spending his days fishing and playing with his grandchildren. Lucas and Rose saved enough money to buy a piece of land outside town, and with the help of friends, they built a comfortable house with room for their growing family. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books and learning. Sarah was more adventurous, always getting into mischief and charming her way out of trouble. Lucas taught them both to ride, though it was Sarah who took to horses with the same natural affinity her father had. Rose taught them to read and write, instilling in them the same love of learning she possessed. When James was 8 and Sarah was 6, Rose announced she was expecting again. This time, they were blessed with twins, 2 more boys they named Matthew and Daniel. The house was suddenly very full and very loud, but Lucas and Rose thrived in the chaos. Their family was complete. The children grew up happy and loved, secure in the knowledge that their parents adored them and each other. Lucas made sure to tell them the story of how he had come to Angel's Camp, how he had heard their mother humming and stopped to listen. "And you never left?" Sarah always asked, even though she knew the answer. "Never left," Lucas confirmed. "How could I when I had found home?" As the children became teenagers and young adults, Lucas and Rose watched with pride as they found their own paths. James went to San Francisco to study law, determined to fight for justice. Sarah married a neighboring rancher's son and started her own family nearby. Matthew became a teacher, taking over the school when Miss Morton retired. Daniel, the youngest and most adventurous, joined the Territorial Rangers. Through it all, Lucas and Rose remained the center of their family, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They had been married for over 30 years, and their love had only grown stronger with time. They still worked at the store, though they had hired help to do the heavy lifting. They still danced together at community gatherings, Lucas's steps more confident than they had been in his youth. One summer evening, as they sat on the porch of their house watching the sun set over the valley, Rose began to hum. It was the same melody Lucas had heard that first day, the one that had changed the course of his entire life. Lucas took her hand, her fingers still fitting perfectly between his despite the years that had passed. "You know, I think about that day sometimes. What would have happened if I had not stopped to listen? If I had just walked into the store for supplies and ridden away?" "I think we would have found each other somehow," Rose said. "Some things are just meant to be. Maybe so, but I am grateful I did not have to wait any longer to find you." Rose rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you have any regrets about staying, about building a life here?" "Not a single one. This is exactly where I was meant to be, with you, with our family in this town. I never knew what home felt like until I found you. I love you, Lucas Zimmerman." "I love you too, Rose, always and forever." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the house, they could hear their grandchildren playing, visiting for the weekend. The sound of family, of life, of love continuing into the next generation. Lucas thought about the young cowboy he had been, hungry and desperate, with nothing but a tired horse and dwindling hope. He thought about hearing that humming and following it to find the woman who would become everything to him. It had been such a small moment, such a simple decision. Stop and listen or ride on by. He had stopped. He had listened. And he had found home. Years later, when Lucas and Rose were well into their 70s, they were still active members of the Angels Camp community. Their children had given them numerous grandchildren, who in turn were starting to have children of their own. The general store had been passed down to Matthew, who ran it with the same dedication his mother and grandfather had shown. Lucas and Rose spent their days in gentle contentment. They worked in their garden, visited with friends and family, and took slow walks through the town that had been their home for so many decades. Angels Camp had changed over the years, growing and modernizing, but it retained the tight-knit community spirit that had welcomed Lucas all those years ago. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the town threw them a celebration. Nearly everyone in Angels Camp attended, along with friends and family from the surrounding area. There was food and music and speeches celebrating the couple who had become pillars of the community. When it came time for Lucas and Rose to say a few words, they stood together before the crowd, still holding hands as they always did. Lucas spoke first. "When I rode into this town 52 years ago, I was a man without a home, without a family, without much hope for the future. I was just looking for work and maybe a hot meal. What I found was so much more. I found a community that welcomed me. I found work that gave me purpose. And I found a woman humming while she worked, a sound so sweet it stopped me in my tracks. That woman became my wife, my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. Everything good in my life traces back to that moment when I stopped to listen." Rose wiped tears from her eyes as she took her turn to speak. "When I was a young woman, I had a good life. I loved my father and my town and my work. But there was a loneliness I did not even fully realize I carried until the day a dusty cowboy appeared in my garden, hat in hand, apologizing for listening to me hum. From that moment, my life became fuller, richer, more joyful than I could have imagined. Lucas gave me love, gave me children, gave me a partnership that has sustained me through every challenge. He stopped to listen that day, and thank God, he never left." The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration continued late into the night with dancing and stories and laughter. Lucas and Rose danced together, their steps slower now but no less sure. As Rose hummed along with the music, Lucas held her close and thanked whatever power had guided him to Angel's Camp on that dusty afternoon so long ago. They lived several more years in health and happiness, surrounded by the family they had created and the community they had served. When Lucas passed away at the age of 81, with Rose holding his hand and their children gathered around his bed, his last words were about how grateful he was for the life they had built together. Rose lived 2 more years without him, though everyone said a part of her left with Lucas. She remained active and engaged with her family, but there was a sadness in her eyes that had not been there before. She spoke often of Lucas, keeping his memory alive for the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who had known him and those who had not. When Rose passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82, the entire town mourned. They buried her next to Lucas in the Angels Camp Cemetery under a shared headstone that read, "Lucas and Rose Zimmerman." He stopped to listen. She gave him home, together forever. Their children and grandchildren continued the legacy they had built, the values they had instilled. The story of how their grandparents met became a favorite family tale, told and retold at gatherings. The general store remained in the family, a testament to the life Rose and her father had built and Lucas had helped sustain. In Angel's Camp, people still spoke of Lucas and Rose Zimmerman with fondness and respect. They remembered the cowboy who had wandered into town and stayed, who had proven that a man could change his stars with hard work and love. They remembered the woman who had hummed while she worked and captured that cowboy's heart. They remembered a love story that had blessed an entire community. And sometimes, on quiet afternoons, when the breeze blew just right through Angel's Camp, people swore they could hear the faint sound of humming, sweet and pure, carried on the wind. It was Rose, they said, still singing for her cowboy. And somewhere, Lucas was still listening, grateful he had stopped all those years ago, grateful he had stayed, grateful for every moment of the life they had shared. The end.